English with Deck. Okay, what are y'all doing today? Bit of a bit of a drawl on that one. What y'all are doing today? How's it going? Howdy, howdy, howdy. Howdy all. How y'all doing today? Y'all lovely people. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with that one. Oh, brilliant. Okay, guys, it's Deck here from Deck English with another episode of English with Deck. Let's go. Alright, guys, now today I just want to talk a little bit about something that has really been playing on my mind and has come to really make me become a bit more self aware of myself, but also about other people around me. And that is essentially the traits that make a good teacher. Now, just to be clear, if you're not aware of what a trait of a person is, basically it is a quality. And a quality is basically something that makes them a good person or something that makes them maybe a bit of a bad person or just makes them who they are. So, you know, what are some traits you look for in a person when you're, I don't know, trying to make a new friend? Maybe you look for someone who's outgoing. Maybe you look for someone who's quite a person, a personable person. A personable person, that's brilliant. Maybe someone who's a bit more, blah, 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 I am so sorry, a bit more quiet and maybe bookish, someone who reads a lot of books. We all have desirable traits. We all have maybe non-desirable traits. There are some traits which are good, some traits which are not so good. Everyone has a personal trait, or traits, should I say. But what I really wanted to talk about today is not individual people's traits per se, but teachers' traits. Traits that make a good teacher. You know, if I think back to my days as a student, there are some teachers who immediately, instantly come to mind. For example, I had an amazing homeroom teacher, or as we call them in England, form teacher. Because the form is the class, the name for your class. So you are form A or Form B, Form C. It might be quite an English way of saying it, but yeah, basically Form A, Form B, Class A, Class C, same meaning there. Anyway, that guy was an absolute boss. He was awesome. A really fun, kind, amazing person. And looking back at that, I was an okay student, but I wasn't the best. I won't lie, I studied, I definitely did not neglect my studies, but I could have been maybe a bit more attentive, a bit more, a bit less of a surly teenager and a bit more of a positive, outgoing chap like I am today. But yes, there's him. And another one is one science teacher I had in high school. She really guided me with a lot of great advice, which has stuck with me to today. And I hope I can pass down a lot of that advice to my kids. I do think of that teacher and her advice quite often. I had some English teachers who were really fundamental in helping me develop. And there are some common traits between these three teachers who I just mentioned, and many others, many others. But what makes them stand out above the others? Well, that's a great question. And I think honestly, it boils down to the traits that make a good teacher from the perspective of the students, from the perspective of the parents, and also from the other teachers' perspective, from the other faculty members' perspective. Now, some teachers will hit the jackpot, personal jackpot. They tick the box in all three of those categories. Some teachers might find it harder to actually bond with the parents, but bond with the children quite well, for whatever reason. Or maybe other teachers are a bit like, I don't personally get along with them, but they're really good with the kids. So, fair enough. There's a whole load of things at play. But, I just want to talk about what makes those teachers really stand out for me. And by the way, I just want to say throughout my life, I've had many different teachers when I've studied in various different establishments. And I remember when I was in college, there were some absolutely phenomenal teachers. A big shout out to Nigel, if you ever listen to this. He was a brilliant teacher, really chill, really calm, and so knowledgeable. Not just about the subjects we were learning, but about pretty much everything in life, as far as I could tell at that point. And then further down the line, some other teachers who were incredibly influential to me. Well, two of them actually were at a language school I attended when I was in Tokyo. And they were only in my life for a very short time, but it was a very intensive course. So we were pretty much face to face, nose to nose, pretty much actually, for the whole period of my time there, around 6 months. And, they were absolutely fundamental again in really shaping the way I viewed my life in Japan and in general in the world, my place in the world. So again, a big shout out to those guys there. Now, okay, let's get to the meat of today's sandwich. Okay, now there are some usual traits which really help to gain popularity and gain trust and gain sort of respect from the parents, from the students, and from other teachers. But as a general list, well, you've got empathy, strong classroom management, clear communication, and a deep and honest dedication. Now, if you hit all those points, I'm so sorry. If you hit all of those points, then you're on the home street. You're walking easy peasy lemon squeezy and all that. But hitting all those points on a daily basis, that is no easy feat. So let's break this down a little bit. Well, from the student's perspective, I would say connection and clarity is the most important. If I think about the teachers I valued, especially, it was the ones who made me feel seen, the ones who made me feel heard and supported. Those teachers, they had heaps of empathy, heaps of patience. They would really sort of be approachable. We've got movement. 1 second. I'm not sure if you heard that there. My youngest took that opportunity to wake up and sort of decide that she wanted to go downstairs to eat breakfast. I passed the baton to my wife for the time being. Okay, where were we? Yes, and also empathy, patience is absolutely paramount in my opinion. I think about the students who I interacted with, and those ones who sort of had patience and could understand not just why we as students didn't understand the topic, but why we were struggling with our education, with life, whatever, those teachers were approachable and, understanding. And that was absolutely fantastic to be able to interact with teachers like that. And of course, on top of that, you've got, clarity, organization, and yeah, fairness, you know. Of course, it goes without saying. A teacher who is clear, they break down complex topics into manageable, understandable concepts. Well, that is obviously, goes without saying, an absolutely key factor to making a good teacher. But it's well and good doing that, all well and good to doing that. But if you are not organized as a teacher, well, from the student's perspective, they pick that up straight away. I think back to some teachers I've had, and it's so clear that on a daily basis they were not organized. They were just winging it, if you may. They were sort of doing it on the fly, which, though I won't lie, there have been times I've had to do it on the fly. And it's okay occasionally. Once every now and again, it's not a massive issue, and also sometimes on the fly has a really positive outcome. But if you're doing that every single time, every single lesson, well, it might work for some of you, but quite often it won't be as productive, you know? And obviously, if a teacher is fair, well, students realize that. Students will recognize that. Students who are A students, students who are maybe struggling a little bit, it doesn't matter. Students will recognize a teacher who is fair. Okay, and now from the parents' perspective, this is very similar to the students. However, I think there is a little more, emphasis on the communication and care given to the students. And as a parent myself, or especially a parent of an elementary school or junior school, if we're talking in the UK terms, student, I'm really aware of the points I'm about to make now. So yeah, if a teacher is proactive in communication, keeping not just your students in the loop, but the carers or the parents of a student, especially for students who are a bit younger. It's so important. And even as an adult learner, keeping the student in the loop. So in the place of a parent, keeping the student who is an adult learner in the loop is also fundamental. So this works both ways. But yeah, proactive communication. And again, this goes for younger students and adult learners, absolutely. But fostering a love of learning, whether you are a child, a teenager, a young adult, an adult, it doesn't matter. Some people naturally gravitate to learning. Some people naturally love learning. Others, don't love it so much naturally. And that's fair. We all like different things. But a teacher who can inspire beyond grades, a teacher who can make a student think, hang on, what does this mean? Hang on, this is, oh, okay, if this and this are said, then this is the answer. Okay, this is what is being meant with this sarcasm. If a student ends up sort of finding inspiration outside of the classroom, naturally gravitating towards learning, that is a really attractive perspective point there, and that is really, really fundamental from a parent's perspective and also an adult learner's perspective. And a big one here, is reliability and consistency. Now, obviously, there are occurrences in life where we suddenly need to take a day off, a week off, occasionally, for maybe a bereavement, a death in the family, or a birth, or just a general illness, or whatever. There are a whole host of reasons why we might suddenly need to be unavailable. However, being 99.99999% of the time reliable and consistent with our schedule and our methods and our way of teaching, well, that really benefits the students and the parents of students. But not just the parents, again, back to if you have an adult, if you have an adult learner, and then having a reliable teacher, a consistent teacher, really, really sort of makes for an enjoyable learning experience. Okay, and lastly, just from the teacher's perspective, what makes a good teacher? Well, a teacher or a colleague even who collaborates and is adaptable is my they are my key points, which I thought would be most attractive. Now, hear me out. Professionalism, adaptability are so important because collaboration, being able to share or willing to share resources, maybe sort of guide newer staff, that really sort of improves the broader education structure. Being adaptable, making it the ability to sort of adjust when a lesson isn't working quite right is very, very beneficial, not only for the teacher, other learners, but for other teachers who are sort of in the vicinity, maybe looking for inspiration. Maybe they are sort of gaining ideas themselves. And this is one thing which is a bit of a sort of cliche, but lifelong learning. We never stop learning. We are never too old to learn. And following on from that, we should always maintain learning routines. Because, a good teacher or even a good person is a continuous learner, constantly refining their craft. They are constantly researching, constantly pushing their abilities. And by doing that, you not only benefit yourself, but you inspire students, you inspire clients, you sort of maintain knowledge and, in a sense, power. Knowledge is power. Okay, guys, now remember, English doesn't have to be difficult. See you in the next one.